Hi, I'm Christy McDonald, and here's what's coming up on One Detroit. Meet our local student reporters this year from PBS's Reporting Labs as they bring us stories of school this fall during COVID-19. Plus, Detroit Free Press photojournalist Mandi Wright reflects on covering the protests against police brutality. And get a little history of Detroit during the 1918 flu pandemic, what we could learn to help us now during COVID-19. It is all coming up on One Detroit.
Support for this program provided by W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Nissan Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you.
Hi there, and welcome to One Detroit. I'm Christy McDonald. I hope you are having a great week. A lot of kids have already gone back to school, starting virtually, some in seat. If you have a kid at home, make sure your wireless is at full speed. What will it be like for kids this fall? Coming up on One Detroit, you'll meet our student reporters from PBS NewsHour's Student Reporting Labs. They're from schools around our area, and they're going to share their hopes and their concerns about school this year. Also coming up, covering the protests against police brutality with photojournalist Mandi Wright. Plus, comparing Detroit's response to the flu pandemic back in 1918 with COVID today. Some history with Tim Kiska. It is all coming up on the show. Well, we're starting off with our student reporters. 4 Detroit area schools are part of the PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs. They're going to be helping us out this year, telling the stories of what life is like at schools right now during COVID-19. Their first assignment, a video diary, so you can meet the students and hear about their concerns and their hopes going into the school year.
The start of school is going to be very chaotic, just because no one really knows what's going on.
Detroit Public Schools is having students take a survey about whether they want to take in-person learning or virtual learning. I chose online learning because I thought it was the safest.
I'm a little sad that we're going to start online, and I just think the thought of doing things online in my own room by myself, it's a very isolating feeling.
For me, I'm going to be going into school. I don't know, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm also excited to get back to school because it's been a really long time since I've actually physically been in school.
At my school, they're doing it kind of different. Everything is still online, but you can go to the school, which I need because if I'm at home, I just feel like I'll go to sleep or I won't take it as seriously as I should.
When you go into a public building, you don't know where these people have been, you don't know what they've been touching, you don't know who they've been around, and there's just no way that you can say, yeah, I'm completely clean and free of the virus. So I think that going completely online is the best course of action right now, given the state of the pandemic.
It's going to be weird the way teachers have to teach, as some of their students are going to be online, some of them are going to be face-to-face.
But I am kind of sad and skeptical about how this is going to work. I'm not really going to get that senior experience, the senior sunset, homecoming, our football games in the beginning of the year. I think it's going to be really hard for me.
I'm going to be doing my online work in my room right next to my bed and just should I sleep in a little bit longer?
And not everybody just has the perfect household that's quiet all the time. So I think that's going to be a huge disadvantage.
What I'm most worried about isn't me, it's my younger siblings. I have a very hyperactive 8-year-old brother and a 10-year-old brother with learning disabilities. I know they probably won't be able to sit in front of a computer for 8 hours.
What are exams or just basic tests going to look like? Also the fact that I have yet to take the SAT.
To prepare for school, I've been online shopping for school supplies, but I'm going to need lots of like hand sanitizer and Clorox wipes and all that stuff.
I'm preparing for school by just keeping myself educated on the state of our country right now, which is very disappointing.
I've been riding my bike around the neighborhood a lot. It helps me clear my mind. Same thing with roller skating. Drawing and playing the guitar are two of my biggest stress relievers, especially if I'm feeling really just down and under the weather.
This year, it's just going to be really different, and it's going to be a lot to get used to. But I think once we start and once the first week or two goes by, I think everybody will feel a lot more comfortable. And
I'll have more time during my break to do my homework, so I feel like that's a huge advantage.
I also don't have to eat school lunch every day anymore.
I'm going to honestly just work as hard as I can online and look for upcoming colleges and, just try my best. So
We'll see how it goes. September 8th, I'm ready. I'm going to treat it like any regular school day. And I hope it's the best year yet.
We are looking forward to working with all of the students as they learn how to become reporters, use video to tell stories, and give us different context and perspective. As they learn, they could probably check out the work of Detroit Free Press photojournalist Mandy Wright. Mandy is a longtime fixture on the local news scene here, and her reports during the demonstrations and protests against police brutality here in Detroit this summer went viral. She talked with Bill Kubota about the coverage and the role that journalists play.
I'm Mandi Wright. I'm live right now, right next to the Marriott. Police are in riot gear, pushing protesters back.
Photographer Mandi Wright has been with the Detroit Free Press 20 years. Things have really changed in the way you do your job with the internet and everything like that really taking hold.
So when I started, we used film until digital became technically almost perfect. And once we went into digital, then we transformed into video, and then it was always about feeding the internet. We're making movies. The Detroit Free Press does documentary films now.
Protesters out in the middle of Jefferson Avenue.
Some of Wright's recent online work has gone big.
You scared?
Especially her coverage of unrest in Detroit after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The first 5 days of protests brought the Free Press many millions of views on Facebook. A simple live feed from a cell phone. 3 hours straight that started May 29.
Okay. It was pretty heated, and then
Fights are broken out.
debris started to be lobbed from the protesters, whether it was water bottles. There was a lot of energy in the protests. People were very angry about the incident in Minneapolis. Started to turn that rage towards the Detroit police.
We're now being pushed up Randolph. It's getting pretty violent.
And there was a point where somebody got shot and killed during all of this.
Right, yes. When I was up in the parking structure, you can actually hear in my footage the shooting. And I go down to the street level, and sure enough.
And I saw blood on the ground.
Oh, no.
The victim, not a protester, not harmed by police. An altercation, gunplay, and 2 young men to be charged with the killing. Protest Day 2 would play out like Day 1. More crowds and police in riot gear minus the homicide. Day 3, a Sunday, came with a curfew.
Screaming, don't shoot!
But how would it be enforced?
The crowd was determined to break the curfew, which was mandated for 8 o'clock. And the crowd was really, they were not going to move. They were not moving.
The woman approaching the police. All right, we got tear gas.
And the police started a full frontal assault to get the protesters out into the street.
Protesters throwing things. And tear gas just coming right at us.
Day 4 was a day there was a 16-year-old kid that rallied the troops to disperse.
Yeah, Stefan Perez, the 16-year-old kid from Southwest Detroit, really wanted the group that they were marching with to disperse by curfew.
After this, disband.
He managed to successfully and I thought that might be a turning point in terms of how the protests would be handled from that point forward.
Right now, the police are just standing down.
They home safe. They don't got rubber bullets. They don't got tear gas. They're not dead. That's all that matters right now.
And it was just an endearing moment. While we're interviewing him, Mayor Duggan calls him on the telephone and congratulates him on the diplomacy in which he handled the marchers.
I was watching the video and I saw your leadership. I have tears in my eyes. You are everything that's special about the city of Detroit.
All right, we're told to step back.
Day 5, Tuesday, June 2nd, on the east side, Gratiot Avenue, and it's getting past 8 o'clock.
We were close, we're trying to cover it, that's our jobs, and police grabbed me. But I was lucky, I was let go. After Gratiot, protesters were still determined to defy curfew, but the Detroit police and the mayor's office decided to make curfew discretionary, which I think was a very successful tactic in allowing people to voice peacefully their First Amendment right.
Last thing I think about this, you're covering it really important stuff with an iPhone. Anybody could do what you were doing, but really, honestly, I don't think that's the case.
Could they?
What do you think?
I don't know. I think that I'm a trained journalist, and I think that makes a big difference. I don't take a side. I try to report as objectively as possible, and I think that was part and parcel why people came to the Free Press, because they didn't have to be spoon-fed an opinion. That's not what I was there to do. I was there to tell what I was seeing and be the eyes for anybody who wanted to watch it.
Throughout this pandemic, we've looked to the past and compared COVID-19 to other outbreaks in history. We've heard a lot of comparison to the 1918 flu. Well, I caught up with Tim Kiska, former reporter, now professor of communications at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. He's also the creator of the Detroit History podcast, where he gives us a good comparison of Detroit in 1918 during the flu pandemic and a sense of what we can learn now. When we talk about what's happening now with COVID-19 pandemic, everyone is looking back in time to the 1918 flu pandemic. And one of those historians who's doing it is Tim Kiska. He's joining me now. He's also a professor at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, longtime reporter and writer for the newspapers here in town. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Pretty good, Christy. How are you?
Good, good. Talk to me a little bit about the podcast that you did here, the Detroit History podcast you've been doing for a while, but you specifically look back now at the 1918 flu pandemic and really what happened in Detroit and the waves that came after. Go ahead and tell me about when you first started thinking, this is what I'm going to delve into and do a podcast on this.
Well, I had in my files, some old clips from 1918, 1919 describing these horrific problems where Ford Motor Company was literally loaning out cars because there weren't enough ambulances. And it sort of sat in my files for probably 5 years. This thing hits, and I thought, wait a minute, we've been to this dance, unfortunately, before. So I wanted to find out what happened in 1918, 1919, 1920. How did we react, but what did we learn from that? And the world was obviously way different in those years. But still, I wanted to find out what happened exactly. How did that roll out in this town?
So you took how many weeks did it take you? And then what are the sources that you went to?
Probably roughly about a month. The sources, I have a fistful of old City of Detroit Health Department bulletins where they recorded some of this stuff. I was looking at old Detroit Free Presses, old Detroit Newses. I interviewed a guy named J. Alex Navarro, who's a medical historian out of the University of Michigan, excellent, and also a guy named Matthew Daly out of Grand Valley State University, who's been looking at this for years and years and years with his class. And I also had this reporter, Christy McDonald, taking me through and reading through the archives. I mean, actually reading what was in the newspaper at that time.
Yeah, I was able to help and voice some of those things as well. And our One Detroit senior producer, Bill Kubota, works with you on these podcasts as well, right?
That's right.
So when you started to take a look, and again, our world is very different in terms of contagion, in terms of the ability that we have to be able to get around the world and the spread of a pandemic. But what kind of parallels did you find between what happened in 1918 and then the 2 years following and kind of where we are now?
Well, one thing that struck me was at one point, it started getting really bad. We're talking about October 1918. And the governor, Albert Sleeper, is seeing, oh my God, this is spreading everywhere. So he's thinking, we got to close this place down. And there was all kinds of pushback from people for a variety of different reasons. One, James Inches, who was the City of Detroit Health Department chief, was saying, wait a minute, this is going to, if we close everything down, there's going to be hysteria. So there was a closure from about October 19th to November 2nd, but people went out in the streets in massive numbers, particularly right after Armistice Day, the day after Armistice Day, November 12th, again, a little later in the month at a Thanksgiving parade, and people got really sick in massive numbers. We're talking in that wave, 1,800 dead. And by the way, that number might be even a little low, because if somebody came in, when you read these health department bulletins, they say flat out, somebody comes wheeled into the emergency room, they've got cancer and the Spanish flu, they die, they're written off as a cancer death. Why? I don't know. But so the numbers are probably higher.
I think what's really interesting that you looked at was the different waves, because we are in what we can only assume is the first wave of COVID-19. That, the experts are looking out saying, look, if we don't take in certain accounts, there is going to be a second wave. It's just going to be a matter of what that looks like.
Yes, and sad but true. And as we mentioned, there were 4 different waves here. There was one in the spring of 1918, another heavy one in the fall of 1918, another one in 1919. The final one was January 20th. So do the math. We're talking a year, 3 months, a year, 4 months later. And what Navarro, who's an expert at this thing, says, what it does is it goes away for a little while and then it comes back, and a lot of people are immune, so they don't get sick. But a lot of people aren't immune and they get sick, and it keeps going and it keeps on going until it finally just sort of another strain comes in and kind of bumps that out, unfortunately.
I think what's interesting is you're not the only one who's looking back in history and the reactions of the time during a pandemic. You had also referenced that the LA Times had done something taking a look at how Los Angeles reacted in San Francisco, and really the tale of two cities when people were very extreme and shutting things down, and one city that did not.
Yeah, exactly. And, in the pushback, you get that. I totally understand it, because you've got people, the place, the deli where I get my corned beef sandwiches, I don't know, for sure, but these people have been working for decades upon decades, to build that business up and do a good business, and then poof, it's melting away before their eyes. So you can see why people are really anxious to get back. It's totally understandable. On the other hand, what you learn from the Spanish flu, and God knows medicine's a lot better, a lot different, but those are the realities right there, as they were 100 years ago.
Our thanks to Tim, and for a link to his podcast, just head to our website at onedetroitpbs.org. And finally, a preview of a documentary coming up on Detroit Public Television on the history of Detroit jazz, especially fitting heading into the Detroit Jazz Festival this weekend.
You can't tell the story of jazz in America without also telling the story of jazz from Detroit. There are just too many musicians that have come from here that have made too big an impact. And the list of great musicians from here just goes on and on and on, all the way up into present day. I don't think the Detroit jazz musicians have gotten their due as a group. Until you put all of these musicians together, you don't really realize how profound an impact that the city has had on the course of modern and contemporary jazz.
And if you just look at the list of artists and you're a jazz fan, it's like, wow, all these guys are from Detroit?
I mean, you can't pick up a record that was made on the East Coast between, say, 1955 and 1970 and not run into 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 or more musicians that are from Detroit.
I would look through the records and find out that, wow, Donald Byrd is from Detroit. Oh, Tommy Flanagan, the great pianist, is from Detroit. Oh, wow, the Jones Brothers. Someone like Ron Carter, who is someone who has really been a mentor to me, probably the most recorded bass player in the history of jazz, is right here from Ferndale.
People don't realize the importance of Detroit jazz. Of course you got New Orleans, you got New York, But then there's Detroit, you know, and it's just a little different. You know, it's a little different. The expectation is higher. When you say that you're from Detroit, they expect you to be a badass.
Why is it that this town of all cities would have, because I mean it's out the way, and why is it that it became the music center? And I was talking to some people today. Actually, I would say that when somebody one of these days sit down and write the history, they will find out that this town has produced more talent and musicians than any other city in America on a one-to-one basis. Now, you got more people that come out of Detroit that are in the music entertainment field than any place in the world.
Jazz is an expression of African American culture. By 1950, 300,000 or so African Americans are living in Detroit. It's about 16% of the population. You have to remember, Detroit, in the middle of the 20th century, in 1950, we're the 5th largest city in the country with 1.85 million people.
Afro-Americans coming from the South, you know, it was running from the fields. Oh, we can work the factory. That's like heaven, you know. And they getting a study, a paycheck, and the paycheck was, after a while, became really substantial. So this became like one of the first middle classes. You know, it was built from the auto industry. Being they had good insurance, good pensions. They couldn't do any wrong.
The center of black life in Detroit in those days was Paradise Valley. There were scores of restaurants, clubs, hotels, providing opportunities for live music and for musicians to make a living. And, you know, musicians could work here and stay here and thrive here. And those neighborhoods, just walking down the street, you could hear blues and jazz seeping out of windows. This sort of thick haze of blues and swing just kind of would settle on street corners. There was classical music in the community, gospel music in the community. Detroit was a center for all kinds of musical activity. You can't underestimate the way in which the culture was saturated with music. Jazz is an expression of all of that.
These places were significant in that it created a space for the African American community, for musicians, for doctors, for lawyers, for families. This was a place that was ours, something that was near and dear to the hearts of people. It was a domain.
The named musicians were working around here. I'm talking about like Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, and those they would live in Detroit and would go to New York to record and then come back here and work the region.
The Bluebird is where Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis and others would come to play in the late 1940s, and they'd play with the local talent who kept up with them. In fact, inspired them. And, you know, they brought this energy.
Detroit Jazz City premieres on September 18th at 9:30 p.m. And you can always find more online at onedetroitpbs.org. That's going to do it for me. Have a great Labor Day weekend. We will see you next week. Take care.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.